We could talk about Part 150. This was more of an opportunity for you all to ask questions or bring up things that perhaps we didn't talk about on the 13th. So happy to answer any questions or entertain any ideas.
I missed the meeting on the 13th. I was out of town, so.
We talked about.
Give me a little summarization since it was a virtual link. I'm wondering if there's anybody joining virtually.
4 people. So we talked about a little bit of the mission of the FAA, which is really the safest aerospace system in the world, which is important to realize what their mission is in today's environment. Talked about Part 150, which is really compatible land uses based on noise contours around an airport.
I'll give you that.
Thank you. And we talked about the noise contour on the Cottonwood Airport, and they use a day-night weighted average where the nighttime has a higher weight. Most of our activities during the day and not at night. The magic number is the 65 LDN line, which has FAA restrictions about residential parks, nursing homes, hospitals, that kind of thing. We talked about access restrictions, which was put into place in 1990 by the Airport Noise and Capacity Act, which says if you meet 6 requirements, you can put access restrictions in place. So in 35 years, no airport's been able to do that. It's very hard. And airports that have lots of money have tried: Burbank, Orlando, Naples. Nobody's been successful. So really isn't an option. We talked about airworthiness, and the FAA controls the noise that airplanes make. And essentially, local jurisdictions have been preempted from having any control of aircraft that are airborne. And that's been since 1958. We talked about what was passed in 2024 with the FAA Reauthorization Act. That bill said the FAA was to form a airport or an aircraft noise review committee and have that in place by November of 2024 to look at noise both inside of the 65 LDN and communities outside of that. That committee has never been staffed. It's never been filled. And if you call the FAA today, they'll say, we have no update. The current FAA budget submitted by the Trump administration has no mention of this noise committee that was supposed to be in place in November of 24. We talked about that we have put into our aviation capital improvement program that we would like to do a Part 150 study. FAA won't fund that till all of the safety things have been put into place at the airport first, but we've asked for that. That's a nutshell of it. We need to do an obstruction mitigation plan. There are obstructions in the runway object-free area that need to be addressed. We need to do some rehabilitation of the parallel taxiway. And I think those are the big ones. We're doing the obstruction mitigation plan, and we're going to do 2 projects. So hopefully this summer, move the windsock, which actually is an obstruction, sits on a hill, get some new guidance signs, new precision approach path indicators, runway end identifier lights. And then we're asking for a grant to do the engineering for the mitigation for obstructions. I guess a better question is, when would I anticipate a Part 150 study being done? 3 to 5 years before they'd even talk to us about that. And they may not fund it. We can ask, and they may not. And it would, remember, it's a land use study. It is land use compatibility based on noise contours. So the folks in Clarkdale would not benefit at all because the 65 LDN line essentially stays on the airport. It doesn't. There's 5 manufactured homes on the east side of the airport that are inside that. And by 43, there might be 15. So I don't think it's a high priority for the FAA. No. Anybody else?
Can I give you the mic here so the folks online can hear the question too?
Just for clarification, did you say 3 to 5 years before a study would be done?
3 to 5 years before the FAA would even consider it, maybe
Okay.
not fund it.
All right. Now, I just have a couple of questions so that I can share accurate information.
Okay. I'll try to be as accurate as possible.
To do this 150 study, from what I've learned, maybe accurate or not, is that the city council would hire an outside consultant to actually do the study. The FAA isn't going to do the study, right?
The FAA would offer a grant to do the Part 150 study, and the city council would then have to accept the grant and the obligations that run with it.
Which is a 10% obligation on that one.
Well, currently, I think it's 5% right now. It usually is 10%, but it depends on the reauthorization bill, but it's 5 to 10%. ADOT, if the trust fund for ADOT hasn't been swept, they would participate at 2.5%.
Okay, and just a ballpark kind of figure, what would that FAA grant be for the study?
I'm guessing 250,000 to 300,000.
Okay, so it could be 25,000 to 30,000 if it's 10% for the city. The city would have to kick in for that study, and they would hire an outside contractor or consultant to do the study.
We would hire using the FAA policies, which are based on quality and not price. And then we would do an independent fee estimate. And so we wouldn't talk price until we offer that contract to a
Right.
particular consulting firm.
Then that outside source would collect our data, which is the ADSB and Vert Tower possibly data.
They typically would use the Vert Tower data for operations, the fleet mix, and put it into what is currently the integrated noise monitoring model and come up with contours.
Right.
In the old
And-
days, we would actually put noise monitors out. They don't do that anymore.
You said they wouldn't, right?
They do not do the noise
Right,
monitors. It's
because a lot of the residents are thinking that this noise study is going to put a decibel monitor near their house. You know,
not the
so,
case, not the
but
case.
that won't happen.
No,
Right. Okay, so last meeting, you postulated that possibly you would see maybe the contour expanding outside to the west and east of the runway another few hundred yards, and maybe down the end of the runway, maybe a quarter mile or so. Maybe that would be the new line.
if you look at the master plan that had the noise contours projecting out 20 years, it puts about 15 or 20 manufactured homes inside the 65, and no other homes are added.
Right.
And it goes out farther to the north and to the east.
And you said that maybe 5 houses would be added to this new contour line that would be inside the noise.
And primarily in the mobile home park.
Right. And if the city wanted to do something about that, then the city would then go through the process of asking for an FAA grant to do some noise mitigation. Would that be a different
Yes.
grant than the noise grant?
So if you look at the language for Part 150, if it's funded, it's no guarantee that the FAA would then fund whatever the plan comes up with mitigation, double pane windows or more insulation. There's no guarantee that if that was what the plan says, they would fund that.
All right. So what we're looking at is possibly the city having to spend $25,000-$30,000 on a study that probably isn't going to significantly change from what we have now, and it definitely won't address the issues that the people farther out from the airport that have a dozen planes an hour flying over their house, and they're measuring it on a dB meter at their house at 64, 65. It doesn't take into that for account at all.
Unfortunately, I think your statement is very accurate. It
Okay.
doesn't address overflight of communities outside of the 65 LDN line, which that 2024 law talked about doing.
Right.
And I don't know how to do that. I mean, you know, as I started to prepare for this, I was asking myself, how would you do, for example, some mitigation for Clarkdale? How would we do that? I don't have, and I've been doing this for 30 plus years. I don't have an answer to that.
Well, there is a city in California that the city has funded its own noise mitigation and monitoring area, and they have their own decibel meters set up at different noise areas, and that's connected to their noise complaint system.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing that I've seen that's kind of outside that magic circle that the FAA is going to draw.
I can tell you in San Diego, when I managed the city's airports, we had noise monitors literally out in the community. And the city ordinance said, if you violate this dB reading at night, the city could fine you. Unfortunately, they had passed that ordinance after 1990.
Right.
And we would have had a terrible time enforcing it and would have been sued and lost.
Yeah. Let's see. I think that answers all of the questions that I. Yeah, that was it. I wanted to get that information correct, so when I share it, I share the accurate information.
Perfect. Anyone else? Counselor Marks? No. I don't know about you, Ryan, but it doesn't seem like we need to form another group or have another meeting about this. I'm going to move on with a recommendation to the new city manager that we form another presentation and go with rates and charges to include landing fees, and task with the council's approval for a tasking order to the on-call planning consultants to do that. So, because we're going to task the on-call engineering guys to do the construction management for the moving the windsock. Sir.
You mentioned that there are 5 manufactured homes that are inside that contour.
Yes.
Where can you point maybe on, well, for the benefit of our audience who are virtual,
I
can you
can.
point?
So this is the noise, the blue line is the noise footprint for 20 years out. Here's the mobile home park off of Mingus. So this little sliver here has about 5 manufactured homes in it.
Do you know which park that is?
What is it, Oro del Rio?
So would Inspiration also be inside that contour?
It's farther over here. It's possible it could be, because I don't think Inspiration was built when the master plan was done. So it's very possible. And I can tell you, as the vice chair of the Orange County Airport Land Use Commission, infill development is always very difficult to control from a community development perspective. that area may have already been zoned and appropriate for high density residential.
Yeah.
May not have been the best use. Let me rephrase that. If you like to see and hear airplanes, that would be a great place to live.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of, maybe they planned it into the construction where there's any kind of, double pane windows that they're already installing.
I suspect, I mean, if I was a developer, I would do that just to eliminate my tenants' complaints.
Right. Thank you.
Definitely close to the airport.
I'm John. I've just got a suggestion. When you put together a program on raising money, increasing money for the airport through landing fees and so forth, it might be a good idea to ask the public, appeal to the public for ideas on how to help raise money at the airport, what kind of functions they might like to see or something like that.
Absolutely. When we do that, it will be very similar to the first presentation. I'll have the consultants probably do most of the talking. That's what they do for a living. And then we would seek input from the public on, what we might do and where we might go. So airports typically subsist on land leases, hangar rents. We don't have to worry about fuel flowage because we are the fuel vendor. And we make anywhere from 50 to 75 cents a gallon above what we pay for at wholesale. I don't have a good number for what land rents for as is, where is. I've got an appraiser that's giving me a report in the fall. But yeah, we would certainly try to find solutions outside of the normal box.
So Rod, just to get some more clarity in terms of the rates and fees. So the consulting firm will do their assessment on rates and fees for the things that you were just mentioning, land fees, hangar fees, things like that.
Right.
So they'll be evaluating current fees and determining what they should be going forward.
And they would look at similar situated airports, socioeconomic in the region, because you couldn't compare Cottonwoods Airport to Prescott. There's no comparison there. Different type of airport. So we would look maybe Payson, maybe Winslow, but that they do that for a living and could say, at this airport, they charge this amount for, dirt as is, where is, this is what they charge for tie downs, and give us a starting point to discuss this.
And will they also be looking at other ways other fees for other services where the airport currently doesn't charge?
Absolutely. I mean, for example, vehicle parking. If you wanted to, park your car, in addition to your airplane, and we know there's a lot of RV parking on airport property that we don't get any money for.
And what about the topic of just revenue generation by the airport in general? Is that something that would be a topic for another
Well, we could
time?
ask them about that in their scope to see, what that would cost. The master plan had what I would call a less than substantial input about the financial component. And when you do a master plan, you have to pay extra for a financial component. We didn't do that in 2022. We should have, but we didn't. The rates and charges, I think, were adjusted by my predecessor in 2022. CPI has increased over the last 3 years. So we clearly need to look at this, and we need to look at landing fees from a perspective of what would we generate if we charged, let's pick a number, $5 a landing, less the cost of administering and billing that. What would that really generate for the airport fund?
So I think it would be helpful just to have all of our options out there in terms of revenue coming in. It's certainly something Councilmember Marks and I have heard quite a lot from the public in terms of if we're going to have an
Absolutely.
airport making this noise, let's at least generate some revenue, serious revenue.
No,
versus where
I
we are
agree. I think
today.
that if we did landing fees, what it would generate at whatever level. And understanding full well that if we look at it from a financial perspective alone, that's fine. If we look at it and say, oh, if we charge $5 a landing, Embry-Riddle won't come. They'll come more because they're paying for it. And they're going to pass that cost on to their students. And then they're going to say, we're paying for this, so we might as well go use it. But I think we need to look at it from what's the cost and what's the benefit.
And I will chime in here and remind that we do have an on-call planner now. We just have an agreement with them, but we also don't have like an unlimited budget to do plan after plan after plan. We need to plan for the plans a little bit. So I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves with all of the use of the on-call planner, because that is not an unlimited fund to pay them for the plans. So yeah, we have budgeted money this year for some of the planning, but some of that planning might have to be budgeted for future budgets.
I think the first thing we want them to do is the airspace safety analysis to look at the traffic pattern altitude and the calm wind runway and go from there. And the next thing we would ask them to do is the rates and charges analysis. But there's a whole bunch of other things that we want to look at. You know, what is the possibility of having an air traffic control tower that we pay for, or we convince the FAA to build and staff as a contract tower? And what would that do for us? A whole nother subject. If you want to have an air traffic control tower, you have to convince the FAA there's enough operational activity. So we're going to break 60,000 operations this year. We'll do 60,000 takeoff or landings, which is more than we did last year. That might be a number that they would consider having an air traffic control tower. Whether, then this administration may be inclined to look at that because their hot button is air traffic and improving the system.
And what would the benefits of a tower be?
A Class Delta airspace tower has to do two things: provide separation of aircraft and provide an altimeter setting. However, if the tower thinks the pattern is saturated, they can tell people, you can't enter the Class Delta airspace. We have too many airplanes in the pattern. Right now, nobody's doing that.
Then what?
Calm wind runway. So we are designating the calm wind runway currently as runway 32. So it departs to the north because there's more open space there. And so part of that analysis will be, is that the appropriate runway from a prevailing wind and land use? And I don't know that, but
So the question is regarding the calm wind runway, and did we used to have a calm wind runway?
I've been involved in this for 6 years, and 32 has always been the calm wind runway. The reason you're finding more aircraft over Clarkdale is when Embry-Riddle started flying here 6 years ago, their pilots, their students could not fly that then pattern, which was gain 500 feet, and before you get to Grosseto Ranch Road, turn right. That was all vacant land. All of our base pilots could do that. That's fairly aggressive. The student pilots couldn't do that safely, so they ended up flying over on the greens and Pine Shadows at 500 feet, and then turning a nice slow loop. Well, everyone complained, so they changed it to 700 feet and finally out to 1,000 feet. And that's what pushed the aircraft out over Clarkdale. It didn't have anything to do with the calm wind runway.
and we're going to look at, with this airspace analysis, changing the traffic pattern. Well, we're going to look at lowering the traffic pattern altitude to 750 feet. And that will shorten the horizontal distance from the end of the runway until the turn.
Tower at the airport. And that is that it might make Embry-Riddle send more aircraft over here, give students a chance to interact with a towered airport where none of the others that they fly to are towered airports.
I think they get a belly full of towered airport at Prescott. Prescott is the busiest GA airport in the country with.
Oh, yeah,
so,
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, everything's a trade-off, you know, a tower is not going to solve everything. It might bring more, it might bring less. It adds a certain level of additional safety when you have people watching in the tower, separating traffic.
That's more liability to the city there if you're
But
taking.
it's not our traffic controllers. It would be the FAA's tower, FAA contract employees. They wouldn't work for the city. So I have found contract towers to be remarkably helpful in the last 30 years. It's opportunity because we're not even talking to the FAA about it. But it's something we ought to talk to them about, especially this administration. I mean, they're all about air traffic safety.
You know, I'm really projecting, but since we are on this subject, would the FAA expect that the number of flight operations be sustainably high, around 60,000 or more? Because historically, you know, it's gone in ebbs and flows.
The FAA has what they call a benefit cost ratio analysis, but they won't tell you what the factors are for that ratio. And we all worry that have contract towers, are we above the limit that's acceptable? So I think the challenge would be convincing FAA air traffic that we need an air traffic control tower based on the operational count. And I would embellish it with, 15% of the takeoff and landings that Embry-Riddle does is at Cottonwood Airport, and 5% of their total operations are at Cottonwood. So if you figure, let's just say they're doing 40,000 operations a year here, they're doing several 100,000 operations over the system that they have. So I think it's worth asking that question to see, and it's probably worth pushing that up the political ladder to our federal officials, because nobody's going to listen to the airport manager at Cottonwood saying we need a tower. But Senator Kelly might. He's an aviator, naval aviator.
So just to close out on the Part 150, did I hear you say, Rod, that you're going to talk to the city manager and recommend what?
I have no recommendation for him on the Part 150. The recommendation I would have is to fund the airspace analysis, to bring it to the council for funding. And I would recommend to him that he also have us fund the rates and charges analysis as the next topic. The presentation and discussion and public involvement in rates and charges.
Okay, so, but with regard to the Part 150 study, no recommendation, meaning no further action on the Part 150?
We've actually asked the FAA to add it to our aviation capital improvement program. And we've asked them to look at that after all the safety issues are fixed. So it's 3 to 5 years out.
On the rates and charges, you're going to have the engineers or the planning team take a look at that. And I just want to marry up, what your concept of, having an ad hoc committee, is this still on rates and charges? Is that still a-
Absolutely. I would ask, after we task them to do that, we would have this kind of a meeting where we would discuss it with we would have them do a presentation for a baseline, and then open it up for discussion and input and ideas. So there may be things that they don't see that other people might.
Okay. So how would you be getting names on people to be on this ad hoc?
I'm not, again, now I need guidance from the new city manager. Do we want, you know, initially it was 5 to 10 people on the group. And maybe we don't want to have 5 to 10 people. We want to have whoever shows up in the room
Okay.
to talk about it. I mean, it's very difficult when you say, we're only going to ask 5 of you to participate. How do you pick those 5 or 10? Maybe Councilmember Marks can pick them instead of the airport manager. I think the whole room should participate. And we'll meet as many times as we need to. It's Kaufman and Associates out of, I think they're out of Scottsdale. They're a nationwide firm headquartered in Kansas City. They do a lot of Arizona stuff. Sir.
Yeah, I would disagree with having the whole room participate. The problem with having a large group make a decision, you never get a decision made.
True.
So you might have a large group to give initial input, but ultimately you are going to have to go down to a small group of people that have heard all of that input and decide this is what we need to do for the city.
And Ryan and I have talked about that, and we're going to need some guidance on how to, you know, get that small group. But you're right. A big group doesn't make a good decision or any decision.
I would just suggest that we end on, if anybody wants to connect with you on anything
Yep.
airport related, how does that happen?
You can certainly email me. You can call me. You can come to my office. My door's usually open unless I'm at a meeting, and I'd be happy to talk to people. Almost all my emails, I end with, I would be happy to meet with you at your convenience wherever you'd like. Nobody takes me up on that.
Just trying to get you some more meetings.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody.